Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is Blue, and we're back with another video. This one is going to be specific for Feral Druids. There's been some changes, so we're on the Wowhead to go ahead and look at those. But something that interests me, we're going to go over those changes as well, but something that interests me, we're going to also be discussing in this video the diminishing returns of secondary stats moving into Shadowlands, what that's going to mean to you. It's probably going to affect your sims, and so you kind of have an understanding of why your sims are telling you that, hey, your main stats are no longer, the most important stats and so forth. So that's something I'm really interested in. Just leave a thumbs up on the video if you like it. Consider subscribing if you want more content like this in the future. But just really jumping into it. So Feral received an aura buff. If you're not familiar with aura buffs, it's essentially a class buff. So instead of changing specific spells, they can just change this aura. They can tune it, saying like, hey, Feral's performing really not as well. Let's just bump him up a few notches. So that's what they did. So the aura was tuned to 15%, and they bumped that up to 15. So that's just a 5% buff to all of our spells. Really good, since it's to all of our spells. It's not going to affect any rotations or anything like that. So really cool there. Now, if you are playing Feral in the beta, you kind of have some, maybe also playing Balance. I do have this Balance here. Balance previously, prior to the Ferals, they actually received a 10% buff. Now, I don't know really where Balance stands as far as DPS. I knew Feral was quite weak, and honestly, I'm not sure if 5% is enough. But if you do play Balance as well as Feral, you can probably try and compare. If Balance was in a worse state than Feral, then maybe that explains it. I honestly don't know, but I wanted to include that. Moving into Shadowlands, my thoughts on it is, and actually it's kind of fun that we brought up the balance changes, is I've been thinking quite a bit about Feral and Shadowlands, and my idea of it specifically is it seems like a class that is kind of turning more into a boomkin playstyle of BFA. And what I mean by that is going into Shadowlands, we're receiving a buff to our bite, and if you play Feral, you already know bite is one of our main sources of damage. And if you're not familiar, just understand Feral bite is like a good chunk. Let's say 40% of our damage is just that finishing bite move with it's just a really juicy move, and then the rest of our kit is just filler until we can bite again. So moving into Shadowlands, we're getting a 5% buff to our bite that we didn't have before in the form of the new Blood Talons. We're also getting Covenant abilities, and with these Covenant abilities, we're giving slots of potency. Sorry, and one of the potency options is to increase our bite yet again. 3% per bleed on the target, so this obviously stacks up 3 times, so we're talking about a 9% buff there. And then, of course, those potency values scale up significantly higher and higher as you rank them up. So that's just rank 1 being 9%. So for me, just kind of thinking about the class, it appears that Feral is going to be one of those classes, kind of like the Balance was previously, where it's just like, hey, you're going to bite no matter how many mobs you are. If you were a boomkin, that's kind of what they were. Is they had an AoE kit, but they didn't use it because it was just so undertuned that they would single target on even just like trash. They would just single target, just crush one single target, and that's what we're gonna do. It's like we do have these AoE kits, and it's like, yeah, sure, maybe I will Primal Wrath, depending on the number, right? But mostly it's just going to be biting in an AoE situation, and then the further we go along the expansion, the further that potency grows. And the more the more crit and mastery value you get, the more and more it's going to be where we just want to bite single target. So kind of interesting. Moving on, this is probably something I'm really excited to talk about. Is it says update diminishing returns for secondary stats in Shadowlands. So this is new. Really cool here how they're changing this, because this actually will. So reading over this, the thoughts, and I'm just going to show you a quick graph here. So what is this? Just give me the details. So in BFA, we had a problem with secondary stats growing to huge amounts, right? And some specific classes really depended on a lot of mastery, like the fire mages, or we just had the ability to stack a lot of secondary stats. And the way that it grew is you're going to see here this blue line. The more and more stats you get, the harder it is to get the next stats, but it grows in a linear progression. So as you get to like 90%, yeah, the next one's going to be a little bit harder, a little bit harder, a little bit harder. The way that Shadowlands is they don't want it to grow linearly. What they want it to do is there's going to be threshold specific spots where it gets super, super difficult. And then you get to the next one and it's like way more difficult and ends up making it so like, let's say you have around 60% of a stat. That next time you get that stat, it's diminished by 50%. Okay, so that's what they want to do. They really want to just like take away those stats when you get too high. Now, of course, everybody's like, well, we don't know if this is a nerf. We don't know if it's a buff because we don't know second stat values. What if, in Shadowlands, our second stats are just huge? They'll be like, oh, we'll just make secondary stats like a huge amount of number. Or from one patch to the next patch, we'll just increase secondary stats by 100 on each piece of gear, and that will make up for this fact that, that it's really that growth or that diminishing return. So we don't really know. Now, with Feral, though, the thing is, and here it is right here, I'll kind of say, so just be aware that in Battle for Azeroth, it was a linear growth, so for every percent it became a little bit more difficult, but it wasn't at the cost of this. This is really heavy, and you can see it here, so you can just be like, okay, let's take a look at 60%. So let's say 60% crit. If I follow this line, BFA hits 60% here, where Shadowlands hits 60% here. So Shadowland requires a lot more stats to get 60%. And then as this line grows, so this one is kind of more zoomed in, this one's more out. So let's look at 80. So as the line grows higher and higher, BFA, it's so much easier to hit that spot, whereas Shadowlands just caps out like 120. Here's BFA, and then here's Shadowland. You're going to need so much more of that. And in fact, they actually maxed it out at a certain cap that in Shadowlands, you're not going to be able to go over 120-something% of a certain secondary stat. So how that's going to affect Feral, I mean, you're going to see here, so 0 to 30, there is no penalty, 30 to 39, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40, and 50% penalties. So when you start simming yourself, you're going to be either Mastery Crit or Crit Mastery. That's going to be your main stats. And what I love about the game, and especially the beginning of the game, is getting those specific gears, just targeting those specific gears from dungeons, and getting those and completing a set with just only crit mastery or mastery crit, however you want to do that. That was fun for me. But you may notice if you start doing that and you start simming yourself, it may just get to the point where it's just like, hey, whoa, you were getting, a huge penalty from critical strike because you have so much. Maybe now you need to go mastery verse build. And that just may happen just because that crit that you're getting, it's diminished by half, and whereas you can get a full value of versatility, it may just end up being more. So what I want to talk about too, we'll go into this really quickly here, mastery. So how you figure out mastery, mastery is a little bit different for each specific class, so they kind of give a graph. It's easy for us though, so essentially we just want to say, hey, what is 1 point of mastery equivalent for Feral Druids? And it's pretty easy. If you want to look at other classes, you can just do the same here. But Feral Druids, it's 2%. So really simple math here. Let's say you have 120 mastery for your Feral Druid. Just divide that by 2, and it's 60%. So you go here from 54 to 66. So you're getting a 40% penalty until you get to 66%, in which when you get over that, you're going to be taking a 50% penalty. Okay. Sorry, that was a lot. Now, I would say this is overall nerf, okay? Obviously, we don't know how secondary stats work, blah, 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 whatever. The thing about Feral Druid is there are crits. Crit's a big, important stat for us, obviously. Like we talked about how Bite's going to be doing a lot of damage. We put a crit on that bad boy crits, and it's doing boom. It's just doing crazy, crazy damage. So we want that crit to keep going up so we can get that a lot Bite. So increasing our crit's good, but the thing is there are certain crit, I'll just say a crit potency number or a main crit stat that when you reach that percentage, it's going to be a big boost to your damage. Okay, now those crit numbers are 25% and then 66%. So you can see here, obviously the 66% is going to be more difficult to get. Now you may ask, like, well, Blue, why are those numbers really important? And crit, obviously, it increases our abilities, our damage over abilities, but it also helps with going through rotation faster. So if you wear a Feral Druid, you have 5 combo points. You just use an example. Each ability you do gives a combo point. So after 5 abilities, I can bite. That's what we really want to do. Well, we also have a passive that says, hey, when you crit, though, instead of 1 combo point, it's 2. So let's say our first ability crits. So instead of 1, it's 2. And now, so that's 1 ability, 2 abilities, 3 abilities, 4 abilities. So instead of 5 abilities, now I have 4 abilities. So I did 1 less. So that's 1 out of 4 abilities. That's 25% crit. So when you have 25% crit, that's actually a boost in our damage versus anything less than that. So that's one of our numbers. And then let's say our first spell crits, our second spell crits, and then this third ability, we really don't care if it crits or not. Okay, so we want 2 out of the 3 to crit. That's a 66%, 66 repeating percent crit. So this will also be a big boost in our damage. Now on BFA right now, I'm about 50-something%. I haven't logged in a while, but that's my normal crit. And then of course I have amplifiers. So I have passive abilities that increase my crit, Tiger's Fury, which increases my crit. I'd say most of the time I'm probably above 66% as long as, as the fight progresses. So those are big damage boosting numbers. Now it's going to be really difficult for us to reach those 66% because we're getting a 40% penalty to that new gear that we're putting on with crit. So it's going to have a lot of crit on there. So I'd say moving forward into Shadowlands, of course they may just buff those secondary stats, they may not, but just the way that they made this is Feral Druid is really dependent on critical strike and mastery, and making us so dependent on those specific stats. This will be kind of an indirect nerf to us, which is unfortunate. But that's it. I was kind of rambling for quite a bit. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Tell me your thoughts. If any of this made sense or if I'm crazy, go ahead and tell me that. I always appreciate it though. But thanks so much. Take it easy, everyone. Peace.